It's Friday, October 8th, 2021. The theme of today's podcast, fall is taking over. It's been a good run. We really have had some really nice fall weather this year. But now we're seeing fall starting to win out and summer losing. Showers in the west and north. Although we've been talking a lot about this storm next week, we do have a fairly decent little system coming through the western United States. It's going to be most likely wet for you folks on the western side of the divide. Western Colorado, western Wyoming, northern Wyoming, parts of Montana and Idaho and Utah with this first system. This is also going to bring a little bit of snow to the high mountains, mainly later today, tonight, and Saturday night. Higher elevation snows will be possible in some of the Intermountain West. We have this break in the weather Sunday and Monday. Then we've got this next storm. Now, the storm track is becoming a little more clear. There is still likely going to be variations. There's going to be some different results on the computer modeling, but right now, I think we're getting a pretty good handle on where we think the storm will track, and that will mean we're starting to get a better idea of who will have the biggest impacts, who will be hit the most, and we'll give you a list at the end of this podcast. We have livestock concerns. We have concerns for hunters heading into the mountains or in the mountains now because it's going to be winter up in the high country here soon. And we have travel concerns. We think the interstates, especially I-80, I-25, and I-90 in this region, as well as all the mountain passes, are going to be impacted, and travelers need to take note. Beautiful fall photos coming on in. Another great shot from Wyoming State Helitech. And the fall colors have just been remarkable this year. Getting on into the plains, a nice shot in Lions Park, Cheyenne, as those cottonwoods now really showing their color in many areas. And then this shot from Rocky Mountain National Park, just spectacular. This coming weekend with the changing weather, we've likely seen our peak. Hopefully you got out and have been able to enjoy. The satellite photos this morning are going to tell us a lot about what's going on. Look at this nice fetch of moisture coming up out of the Pacific through Southern California, through Utah. This is the next frontal system and trough that's coming on in. This is going to be the weather maker here for the next 48 hours. And here it is. You can see a bigger swirl taking shape up there north of the Aleutians. And let's zoom in on that. Our new satellite technology that we have access to is just amazing. I wanted to show you that swirl. I've taken out the border areas so just you could see what it looks like without putting the borders on. The Aleutian chain is right here, but you can see how impressive and how large this storm system is taking shape up there north of the Aleutians. So this guy, in a mere 96 hours, is going to be in the Four Corners region, making a big trip down to the south and east. Now, radar showing the moisture from this first system, and I wanted to highlight this. It's actually raining in Las Vegas this morning. Parts of Southern California getting rain. Even up around Livermore, California, a trace amount of rain reported overnight, and it's going to snow a bit in the high Sierras today and tonight. This is with the next system moving on in, so good news for those areas that really need it. You can see the trough coming on in. This is for this afternoon. We've got the low up here, then there's the big low up along the northwest areas of Alaska. As we go into the weekend, this is for Sunday morning. So here it is. It kind of gets ripped apart a little bit. This is why this system is really not going to produce much rain here, at least in this area here. As we go through the next 48 hours, most of the moisture will be along the western slope. And here it is. You can really see a nice swath of moisture with this system that stretches back like this. So nice to see that rain up in North Dakota. This is going to be a really nice little swath of needed moisture up into Yellowstone Park, the Bighorn Mountains. The elevation for snowfall will probably get down to about 8,000 or 9,000 feet, but mostly above 10,000 feet. But really, really good to see that moisture there. They really need it. And you can see that it's going to be an active shower pattern, but there's this notch here in southeastern Wyoming and the front range of Colorado where the downslope or the Chinooking effect of the wind going downhill will really eliminate much in the way of any shower activity this weekend here. It's mainly along and west of the divide. So this is storm number one, and here's the snowfall forecast through Sunday with this first system. So you can see up in the Yellowstone Plateau, the Beartooth there, the Bitterroot, the Bighorns, higher Bighorns and Uintas, and even the Sierra is going to get a little bit of snow. And look how cold it's getting across central and northern Nevada. Snow levels dropping pretty far south there. All right, so that's system number one. Here is system number two. What we're going to show you now are the three different model solutions. We've got a lot of different models we look at, but there are the three main ones that you look at when you take a look at what the long range is going to give you. This is the European model showing the center of the low pressure system by Wednesday morning between Fort Collins and Cheyenne. That is the European model, a very impressive storm winding up there. This is what we would call the GFS, or the Global Forecast System, which is the American model, which has the low more towards northwest Kansas as opposed to being right here. Then let's look at the Canadian model, which has got the low more towards central Wyoming. First of all, we feel that the Canadian model is an error. It's very difficult for low pressure systems to get organized in the central part of Wyoming due to the complex terrain. This is likely a model error, and we've seen that before. The GFS model is showing a pretty intense little system right here in northwest Kansas, but actually maybe a little bit too far south, while the European model is a bit of a compromise. If you notice the GFS model and the Canadian model, the European model is in between. We're likely going to see the low somewhere in this vicinity right here, and that is going to dictate who gets the heaviest moisture, because the heaviest, stormiest weather is always in the northwest quadrant of the upper level low. So that's what we're going to focus in right now as we take a look. And this is the precipitation forecast with the second storm system. And you can see a very impressive swath going across the region right here. Now, if the low goes more north, the axis of heavier moisture will go this way. If the storm ends up more south, let's say it ends up more here in east central Colorado instead of near the Cheyenne, Fort Collins area, then this axis of heavier moisture will shift more south into northern Colorado and southeastern Wyoming. You see this notch though? There is going to be a notch where there's not going to be much precipitation. There'll be a lot of cold and wind. And this is happening because you get a downsloping effect. The counterclockwise spin around the low brings winds downhill off the mountains. And you always get this little dry wedge that shows up with these deep storms like this. That's why you want to be on the northwest side of the low to get the heavier precipitation. If we were to convert that to snow, it's still showing very, very impressive snow amounts. And you probably have noticed there's been very, very consistent patterns showing up over the last few days with the darker pink colors over southern Montana, northern and central Wyoming. I think that is the area, this area right here, that is going to be the most impacted with the heaviest amount of snow, wind, and the worst weather. And it may extend a little bit further more out like this as well. So if we were to list, and we're going to do that here on the next couple of slides, where we think the worst weather will be. The wind is a factor as well with this storm. 65 mile per hour wind gusts being predicted, possibly in the Rapid City area. You can see there's a band of really strong winds right here as the storm intensifies. And if you put that wind with any amount of snow, you're going to have a problem. Now, I will say this. We have seen colder October storms. This is not a terribly cold one in terms of extreme cold with it, but certainly cold enough to bring the snow down to the lower elevations and some hard freezing temperatures. Now, this is where we think the biggest impacts will be. All of Wyoming, especially central and northern Wyoming. So Casper, Buffalo, Sheridan, Gillette, Worland, Cody, Powell. You get up into those areas. I'll include Lander and Riverton into this, and places like Jackson. That's not to say the rest of Wyoming won't get it. All of Wyoming will be impacted, but that is the area where we think it'll be impacted the most. This would include southern and eastern Montana. This would include Billings. This would include a log and north of the Wyoming border into the eastern plains of Montana. The western Dakotas will be impacted as well with rain, wind, and snow. Northwest Colorado, around Steamboat, around the mountains around Craig, you're going to need to watch as the wraparound moisture with this storm could pump in some good moisture there. So I really want to get the word out to you elk hunters in Montana, Wyoming, as well as eastern Idaho and northern and northwest Colorado to be prepared. We're going to update this podcast on Sunday, with this being the first real major weather system of the year. Sometime Sunday, when the new data comes in, this probably means late morning Sunday, we'll post an update on the Day Weather YouTube channel on this storm. Have yourself a great Friday. We'll talk to you again with the update on this storm on Sunday. Have yourself a good weekend.